Title: 6 Creepy True Horror Stories from Unexplained Travel Experiences. We think of travel as an adventure, right? A chance to see the world, make some memories. And for most people, it's exactly that. But for some, a dream trip can curdle into a nightmare they'll never forget. These aren't your usual travel mishaps. No missed flights or bad hotels here. These are stories about unsettling encounters in unfamiliar places, dark secrets buried in the middle of nowhere, and that terrifying, bone-deep feeling that you are not welcome. These are the stories from the edge of the map, where the world you know just falls away and something else, something predatory, takes its place. Tonight, I have 6 true horror stories from travelers who pushed into the unknown and found something awful waiting for them. Our first story takes us deep into the woods, where a solo hiker learned that the silence of nature can hide some truly terrible secrets. Story 1. The things they left behind. I've always been one for camping alone. There's a purity to it, you know? Just you and the wilderness. No small talk, no compromises. That's what I was looking for on my trip to the Pacific Northwest. I'd picked a trail known for being remote, especially in the off-season. 3 days in, I hadn't seen a single person. The air was crisp, the forest was dead silent, and I was exactly where I wanted to be. That all changed on the afternoon of my 4th day. I was hiking a ridge when I saw this splash of color through the trees that just didn't belong. It was a small, one-person tent, maybe 50 feet off the trail, crammed into a thicket of pines. Camping that far from a designated site is weird, and my guard went up immediately. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. I waited, just listening, but the only thing I could hear was the wind. Curiosity won. I stepped off the path and walked slowly towards the tent. The closer I got, the worse this feeling in my stomach became. The tent flap was partly unzipped. The fabric looked weathered, like it had been out there for weeks, maybe longer. I peered inside. The whole thing was a wreck. A dirty sleeping bag was unrolled. Clothes were thrown around. There was an overturned can of beans and a kid's teddy bear, its little button eyes staring blankly at the roof of the tent. But what made me freeze was the smell. It was this heavy, sweet, rotten odor that just hung in the air. And on the back wall of the tent, scrawled in what I think was mud, were 3 words. Asterisk, don't look down. My heart was pounding in my chest. I backed away, real slow, my eyes scanning the forest floor. And that's when I saw it. Just a few feet from the tent, mostly covered by fallen pine needles, was a patch of freshly disturbed earth. It was about the size of a person. I didn't stick around to investigate. I just turned and ran, and I didn't stop until I was miles away, with the image of that patch of dirt and those 3 words burned into my mind. I never found out who was in that tent, or what they didn't want me to see under the ground. And I never, ever went camping alone again. Story 2. The extra mile my first solo trip abroad was to this huge, chaotic city in Southeast Asia. I was 22 years old and felt pretty much invincible. The first few days were amazing. I was exploring temples, getting lost in crowded markets. On my 3rd day, I was trying to find a landmark a little bit outside the main tourist area. I must have looked completely lost, because a friendly-looking guy my age came up to me with this big smile. "You need help?" he asked in pretty good English. I told him where I was going, and he immediately offered to walk me there, saying it was on his way. At first, I was just grateful. He was charming, he knew all the shortcuts, and he led me through these narrow alleyways I'd never have found myself. But as we walked, his questions got personal. Was I traveling alone? Where was my hotel? First time in his country? I gave him vague answers, but this knot of unease was tightening in my gut. He kept insisting he'd take me all the way to my hotel after we saw the landmark, saying the city was dangerous at night for a woman by herself. We got to the landmark, but he didn't leave. He followed me around, standing just a little too close, his smile never really reaching his eyes. I told him I was heading back, and that I could get there on my own. No, he insisted, grabbing my arm lightly. I will take you. It is no trouble. Panic started kicking in. I politely but firmly pulled my arm away and started walking fast back toward a busier street. I didn't look back, but I could hear his footsteps right behind me, keeping pace. My heart was pounding. I ducked into a crowded cafe and found a table way in the back. Through the window, I saw him stop outside, scan the crowd, and then he just waited. He stood across the street, watching the entrance, for almost half an hour. I have no idea what he really wanted, but I know it wasn't good. I waited until he finally seemed to give up and leave before I grabbed a taxi, making sure it took a completely different route to a hotel I wasn't even staying at, just in case. Story 3. The sound from the ridge. My girlfriend and I were road tripping through the Appalachian mountains. We're both big hikers, and we'd found this trail that promised incredible views from a high, exposed ridge. We were the only car at the trailhead, which felt perfect. The hike up was gorgeous. The world just fell away below us, and the air got thin and quiet, too quiet. By late afternoon, we made it to the ridge. The view was incredible, but there was this unnerving silence up there. No birds, no bugs, just the sound of the wind whipping past our ears. We were taking pictures when my girlfriend Sarah said she had to find a spot to use the bathroom. She walked about 30 yards away, behind a big rock formation that completely blocked her from my view. I kept snapping photos, totally lost in the scenery. A minute or two went by. Then I heard it. It wasn't a scream like in the movies. It was a choked, guttural cry, cut short almost as soon as it started. It was the sound of pure animal terror. "Sarah?" I yelled, but the wind just swallowed my voice. No answer. I sprinted towards the rocks, my mind racing. Did she fall? Was it an animal? I rounded the formation, and what I saw made zero sense. Sarah was on the ground, scrambling backward on her hands and heels, her face just white with terror. Her eyes were locked on the empty space right in front of her. There was nothing there, just rocks and sky. "What is it? What happened?" I yelled, pulling her to her feet. She was shaking so hard she couldn't speak, just pointing at the empty air and yanking me away. She kept looking over her shoulder, her eyes wider than I'd ever seen them. We ran. We just ran, not stopping until we were off that ridge and back in the thick cover of the trees. It wasn't until we were locked in the car that she could finally tell me what happened. She said when she stepped behind the rock, a man was just there, standing there, staring at her. He wasn't a hiker. He didn't say anything. He just smiled, this wide, unnatural grin, and took one slow step towards her. That's when she screamed. We reported it, but of course, they never found anyone. There were no other cars, no other hikers. Just an empty ridge and a sound I will never, ever forget. Story 4. The wrong detour. It was supposed to be a straight, 10-hour shot across the Midwest for a friend's wedding. But a massive wreck shut down the interstate, funneling everybody onto these winding country roads. My GPS rerouted me, and pretty soon I was deep in rural farm country as the sun was going down. After an hour on these back roads, I realized I hadn't seen another car in a long, long time. Then my car started making this horrible clunking sound, and the engine just died. I was stranded. No cell service, just cornfields stretching into the darkness. I saw a single light about a half-mile away, a farmhouse. With literally no other choice, I started walking. As I got closer, I could see a man sitting on the porch, just a silhouette against the light from a window. He was sitting perfectly still, watching me get closer. "Excuse me," I called out. "My car broke down. Can I please use your phone?" He didn't move or say anything for a long moment. Then, in this slow, flat voice, he just said, "We don't have a phone." I knew he was lying. I could see the flicker of a TV inside. This overwhelming sense of dread just washed over me. This man didn't want to help. He wanted me to leave, or maybe worse. "Okay, sorry to bother you," I said, backing away slowly. As I turned, I saw a light flick on an upstairs window. A woman's face peered out from behind the curtain for just a second before vanishing. She looked terrified. I walked back to my car as fast as I could, without actually running. I locked the doors and just sat there in the dark, praying. About an hour later, a tow truck appeared, coming from the direction I'd been heading. The driver said he'd gotten a call about a disabled car on this road, but the caller didn't leave a name. He towed me to the next town. I never told him about the farmhouse. I didn't want to know who made that call or why. I just wanted to get as far away from that place as I could. Story 5. The Last Ferry. I was backpacking through a remote chain of islands, hopping between them on these small local ferries. I'd spent the day exploring and completely lost track of time. I got to the dock just as the last ferry of the night was pulling away. I yelled and waved my arms, and to my surprise, the little boat actually turned around for me. When I climbed on, I realized how empty it was. It was just me, 2 crew members, a captain and a deckhand, and 2 other passengers. A man and a woman sitting silently at opposite ends of the boat. The sun was gone, and this strange, heavy quiet settled over us as we chugged out into the black water. About halfway across, the ferry's engine sputtered and died. The deckhand didn't seem worried at all. He just shrugged and went below deck. But something felt really wrong. The other 2 passengers hadn't moved a muscle. They just sat there, staring out at the dark ocean. They looked less like travelers and more like statues. The captain came out of his cabin and walked over to me. "Don't worry," he said, but his smile was cold. "We just have to wait." He then walked over to the male passenger and whispered something in his ear. The passenger nodded slowly, stood up, and walked to the edge of the boat. Without making a sound, he climbed over the railing and dropped into the black water. I just stared in horror, but nobody else reacted. The captain just watched, and the woman kept staring straight ahead. I looked at the deckhand, who was back on deck, and he just shook his head at me, like a silent warning. I felt this cold, paralyzing fear. I was trapped on a boat in the middle of nowhere, with people who were not just strange, but lethally so. A few minutes later, the engine coughed back to life. The captain turned the boat, and we kept going like nothing happened. When we docked, I was the first one off. I ran and didn't look back. I don't know what that was on the ferry. A ritual? A murder? I only know that I wasn't supposed to see it, and that if the engine hadn't started again, I think I might have been next. Story 6. The Watcher in the Woods. My friends and I were camping in a national forest, miles from any main road. It felt like we had the entire wilderness to ourselves. We set up our tents in a clearing, got a fire going, and stayed up late telling stories under the stars. I woke up in the middle of the night with that weird, primal feeling that I was being watched. I sat up in my sleeping bag and just listened. Nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid and tried to go back to sleep, but the feeling wouldn't leave. I unzipped my tent just enough to look outside. Across the clearing, right at the edge of the tree line, I saw a shadow. It was tall and thin, shaped like a man, but it was unnaturally still. It just stood there, partly hidden by a tree, watching our camp. I was completely paralyzed with fear, clutching my flashlight, but way too terrified to turn it on and give myself away. I watched for what felt like forever. The figure didn't move. I don't even think it was breathing. It was just this unnerving presence in the dark. My mind started playing tricks on me. Was it just the moonlight? A weirdly shaped tree? But the longer I stared, the more certain I was that it was a person. Then, very slowly, it lifted one long arm and pointed. Not at me, not at the tents, but at an empty spot in our clearing right next to the dying embers of our fire. It held the pose for a few seconds, then lowered its arm and just melted back into the trees. It was gone. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. As soon as it was light out, I got out of the tent and went to the spot where it had pointed. There was nothing there. Just dirt and grass. I never told my friends what I saw. I didn't want to scare them, but a part of me also didn't want to say it out loud. I have no idea what that thing was, or what it wanted me to see. And that uncertainty is the most terrifying part. Some things you see when you travel, you can never unsee. And sometimes, the questions left behind are so much more horrifying than any answer could ever be. Conclusion. The world is full of beautiful places, and it's built for adventure. But it's worth remembering that not all who wander are lost. Some of them are waiting. The stories you've heard tonight are a chilling reminder to always trust your instincts. Sometimes that feeling in your gut is the only thing standing between you and a story you might not live to tell. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you have your own creepy or unexplained travel story you'd be willing to share, you can submit it to the email address in the description below. Stay safe out there and travel wisely. Title: Haunted House Tales for a Spooky and Unsettling Night for My Family. The old Blackwood Manor was meant to be a new beginning. It was our chance to get away from the crushing noise of the city, to build a life with quiet mornings and the smell of rain on old soil. The crumbling walls, the gardens choked with weeds, none of that scared us off. My wife, Sarah, saw potential under the peeling paint, and my kids, 14-year-old Maya and 7-year-old Leo, just saw a castle they could explore. We saw a future. We were wrong. As we'd soon find out, the house had its own plans. The whispers started small, just a faint murmur right at the very edge of hearing. She, like wind sighing through a keyhole. We just brushed it off, as the groans of an old house settling, the building creaking under the weight of its own long history. But the whispers were only the beginning. The real horror wasn't something hiding in the shadows. It was the house itself. Section 1, A New Beginning. That first month was honestly perfect. We poured every cent and all of our energy into the manor, and it really felt like we were breathing life back into it. I'd spend my days patching up the roof. Sarah would be out in the garden, trying to coax roses from the thorns, and the kids would explore the endless dusty rooms. Their laughter would echo through the halls in a way that finally made the massive place feel like a home. We were happy. Genuinely, truly happy. The house, for all its decay, had this strange kind of charm. Sunlight would cut through the grimy windows and light up the swirling dust like a million tiny stars. But even in those early days, there were odd things. A door I was sure I'd left open would be shut. Sarah's favorite coffee mug would disappear from the kitchen counter, only to show up on the mantelpiece in the library we never used. We'd just laugh about it. Old house, faulty latches, and we were all still getting used to the layout. It's easy to misplace things, right? The first real chill I felt came one evening when I was patching a crack in Leo's bedroom wall. He was sitting on the floor, lining up his little toy soldiers. "They don't like the noise," he said. His voice was so small. I stopped sanding. "Who doesn't, buddy?" He pointed with his little finger toward the wall. "The people who whisper." I pressed my ear against the cold plaster, fully expecting to hear the wind, maybe a mouse. I heard nothing. But when I pulled my head away, the skin on my cheek was numb with a cold that felt like it was coming from deep inside the stone. That night, when I tucked him in, he looked over at the wall and whispered, "Good night." Section 2. The cracks appear after that? The whispers started happening more often. You could never make out actual words, but they started to have ... personalities. Sometimes it was a dry, rustling hiss that seemed to come from the floorboards. Other times, it was a wet, gurgling murmur from deep in the pipes. Sarah started complaining about a smell of decay, like rotting flowers. It was this cloying sweetness that would just appear in a room for an hour and then vanish. I could never smell it. Its fleeting nature just made me think she was stressed. I mean, the house was a huge project. Maya was the next to change. My smart, cynical teenager became quiet and withdrawn. She started spending all her time in her room with the door locked. When we did see her, she had dark circles under her eyes. Her skin was pale. One night at dinner, she just dropped her fork, and it clattered on her plate. "It's watching me," she said, staring right at the ceiling. "When I'm trying to sleep, I can feel it. The whole house. It's watching." The psychological toll was building, slowly chipping away at our peace, blurring that line between feeling uneasy and feeling paranoid. The house wasn't just a setting for weird things anymore. The setting was the weird thing. The real turning point, though, came during a storm. Rain was hammering the windows, and the power flickered out. We lit some candles, trying to make a game of it for Leo. He was in the main hallway, playing with a ball, when a sudden gust of wind slammed the heavy oak front door shut. The sound was like a cannon going off. But there was no wind in the hall. The candles right next to the door didn't even flicker. Then we heard the lock, a heavy, solid thunk. I ran to it, rattling the handle. It was solid. We were locked in. Sarah looked at me, her face a mask of pure, dawning terror. It wasn't the wind. The house did it. Section 3. The revelation of the hungry house trapped. The feeling is primal. We were totally cut off, physically and mentally. We found an old crowbar down in the cellar and finally managed to pry the door open, the wood splintering as it fought us. But that feeling of safety? It was gone. Forever. The next day, I found it. Tucked away under a loose floorboard in the attic was a leather-bound journal. The ink was faded, the handwriting a panicked scrawl. It belonged to a man named Elias Thorne, the man who'd built the house over a century ago. His first few entries were filled with hope, a lot like my own. He wrote about his family, his dreams for this place. But then the tone shifted. He started writing to the house. He described it as a geological parasite, some kind of organism made of wood and stone that he had woken up by mistake. He wrote that it didn't feed on ghosts or life force, ... that it fed on emotion. Specifically, our fear. "The fear is its mortar," one entry read. Asterisk, "My wife's anxieties have repaired the southern wall. My son's night terrors have mended the roof." It was his entire descent into madness, right there on the page. The last entry was almost impossible to read. Asterisk, "It is not enough to haunt. It must consume. It reshapes itself with our dread. It is a hungry house, and we are its endless meal." A hungry house. That phrase sent a chill right through my bones. That night, I was staring at that hairline crack in Leo's wall, the one I kept meaning to fix. As I watched, a milky, translucent film oozed out of the plaster, and the crack slowly, impossibly, sealed itself shut. The house was healing itself. It was feeding on us. Section 4. The parasitic possession. Once we knew the truth, the horror just got worse. Our fear was its fuel, and the house was gorging itself. The small changes became grotesque. A hallway would feel longer one minute and shorter the next. A doorway we'd just walked through would suddenly be a solid wall of plaster. The layout of our own home was constantly changing. A shifting, malicious labyrinth built to make us as terrified as possible. The house wasn't just a character in our story. It was a predator, and it was hunting our minds. Sarah swore the pattern on the wallpaper in our bedroom was changing. that the roses were slowly twisting into screaming faces. Maya wouldn't even leave her room. She claimed the floorboards outside her door would shift and move like the ribcage of some breathing animal. The one place you're supposed to feel safe was being twisted into a nightmare, a violation that left us constantly on edge. And that smell of decay was everywhere now, thick and suffocating. The psychological warfare was brutal. The whispers started to sound like our own voices, twisting our words, replaying old arguments, feeding our paranoia. It was pure gaslighting, making us doubt what we were seeing, making us doubt each other. Was Sarah just tired? Or was the house making her see things? Was Maya just being a dramatic teenager? Or was she its main target? We started turning on each other. Our family was crumbling, and the house just grew stronger with every argument, every tear, every terrified silence. The walls seemed straighter. The paint looked less peeled. Our despair was literally rebuilding the place. Section 5. The last stand, you can't fight a ghost. We had to fight the house itself. The front door was now sealed with what looked like solid stone, molded right out of the original frame. We had no way out. Elias Thorne's journal was our only hope. He believed the house had a heart, a central point where its consciousness came from, the original foundation stone, deep in the root cellar. Armed with sledgehammers and a tiny flicker of hope, Sarah and I went down into the dark. The air was freezing and seemed to vibrate with a low hum, like a giant sleeping animal. The cellar wasn't just a cellar anymore. The walls were weeping a thick, black sludge, and the dirt floor felt like it was pulsing. In the middle of the room was a large, flat slab of granite, veined with something that glittered. The heart. The second I raised the sledgehammer, the hum became a deafening roar. The house fought back. The stairs we'd just come down dissolved into a muddy slide. The ceiling cracked open, raining down dirt and squirming worms. The whispers became one single collective scream that tore through our minds, showing us our worst fears. Leo, lost and crying in some endless hallway. Maya, her face blank, her eyes vacant, slowly becoming part of the wall. It was a full-on assault on our sanity. But Thorne had written one last thing. It starves without fear. Don't listen, I screamed to Sarah over the noise. It's not real. It's just the house. I shut my eyes, forcing myself to picture my family, safe and smiling in our tiny old city apartment. I clung to that memory like a shield. I swung the hammer. The moment it hit the stone, the whole house screamed a sound of grinding rock and splintering wood. Sarah joined me, her face a mask of pure grit. We struck it again and again. With every single blow, a tremor shook the manor. Plaster fell from the ceiling, and a huge crack snaked up the cellar wall. And then we saw it. Light, real, actual daylight, streaming in. An opening, a way out. If you've ever felt a chill in your own home that you just couldn't explain, or heard a noise that made the hair on your arm stand up, share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the scariest things happen in the places we're supposed to feel the safest. And if you want more unsettling tales that will stick with you long after this is over, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Conclusion. We scrambled through that crack in the foundation, crawling out into the muddy, overgrown garden. We didn't look back. We just ran, piling into the car, and we didn't stop driving until the silhouette of Blackwood Manor had completely vanished from the rearview mirror. We never went back. We lost everything we had in that house, but we had our lives, and we had each other. For a long time, I actually thought we'd won. But sometimes, late at night, when our new house is quiet, I can still feel it. A cold spot in the room that doesn't have a source. A faint smell of damp earth and something sweet. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see the fine cracks around my own eyes. The lines of stress and fear that are now etched into my face. And I can't help but wonder, Did we really escape the hungry house? Or did we just take a piece of it with us?